The first sign came as a whisper in the data, a subtle anomaly that Dr. Samantha Moreland might have missed if she hadn't spent 20 years studying gravitational waves. She sat in her dimly lit office at the Gravitational Wave Observatory, staring at the screen as her coffee grew cold beside her. The readings didn't make sense. "Run it again," she muttered to herself, fingers flying across the keyboard. The simulation produced the same result, a gravitational signature unlike anything she'd seen before, approaching from the outer edges of the solar system. Her phone buzzed. Another missed call from Max, her 16-year-old son. She'd promised to attend his science fair presentation, but this anomaly demanded her attention. She'd make it up to him somehow. She always said that. The emergency conference call came together quickly. Faces populated her screen: Dr. Thomas Wagner from CERN, Dr. Yuki Tanaka from the Tokyo Observatory, and several others. Their expressions ranged from skeptical to concerned. "A black hole cannot simply appear," Wagner said, his voice thick with a German accent. "They require time, millennia to form." "Nevertheless, it's here," Tanaka replied, her image backlit by what Moreland recognized as the control room of the Tokyo facility. "The telemetry confirms it. The mass is approximately 5 solar masses, its Schwarzschild radius consistent with a black hole of its size." Moreland cleared her throat. "What's its trajectory?" Tanaka nodded to someone off-screen, and a graphic replaced her feed. The solar system appeared in crisp detail, the familiar dance of planets around the sun disrupted by a blinking red icon near the edge. A dotted line extended from the black hole's position, slicing inward like an accusatory finger. The line intersected with Earth's orbit in precisely 487 days. Silence fell over the virtual room. Even the bureaucrats seemed briefly at a loss. "Let's not jump to conclusions," said Admiral Harrison, his uniform adorned with so many stars he might have been auditioning for space itself. "This could be some sort of gravitational lensing effect, or a rogue star masquerading as Dash." "It's not," Moreland interrupted. "The gravitational pull is unmistakable. If it were lensing, we'd see distortions in the surrounding light. This isn't a mirage. It's real." "Then explain how it got there, Doctor," the Admiral shot back, his tone sharp. "Objects don't appear out of thin air." Moreland couldn't explain it. The formation of a black hole required the collapse of a massive star, an event that should have been visible from light-years away. There had been no precursor supernova, no neutron star shedding its last gasps of radiation. It was as if the universe had conjured it, a magician pulling disaster from its hat. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I can tell you this, it's not natural." That night, she found herself on the roof of her apartment building, a place she rarely visited. The city stretched below her, a glittering sprawl of lights and motion. She'd lived here for years, yet the view always struck her as alien, a chaotic grid imposed on the earth. Somewhere in that mess was Max, full of all the sharpness and rebellion she'd lacked at his age. They hadn't spoken in months. She scrolled through the data again, as if rereading it might make it less real. It didn't. Instead, she noticed something she'd overlooked earlier: subtle perturbations in the black hole's path. It wasn't moving in a straight line but wobbling slightly, as if something was steering it. Her phone vibrated. Max's name appeared on the screen. Her hand hovered over it, uncertain, before she swiped to answer. "Yeah," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Look, I don't know, answers or something," he said, his voice sullen. "Mom said you'd know. About this weird stuff the news keeps saying. Something's messing with time or gravity or whatever. My school cancelled exams because everyone's clocks are acting weird." His words were an anchor in the storm, grounding her in the mundane even as the cosmos unraveled. "It's complicated," she said carefully. Something's happened out by Neptune. A black hole. That's bad, right?" "It's concerning," she said, choosing her words carefully. But we're working on it. There was a long silence, then softly, "You always say that. But you're never really here, are you?" The call ended before she could reply. By morning, the news had reached the public. The term black hole trended worldwide, though most headlines veered towards the sensational, end of days, cosmic invasion. Scientists scrambled to provide sober explanations, but the truth was they knew as little as the average person. Only the numbers offered any clarity. Admiral Harrison had already mobilized a response team. The world space agencies pooled their resources, and a plan began to take shape. They would need a ship, a crew, and someone who understood what they were dealing with. Moreland knew they would call her. She also knew she would accept, even though it meant leaving Max behind again. Some forces were bigger than family, bigger than guilt. Sometimes the only choice was to face the void and hope you could find your way back. She just wished she could shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The anomalies began 3 weeks after the announcement. Dr. Samantha Moreland stood in her lab at the Gravitational Wave Observatory, watching as data streams painted an increasingly disturbing picture. The black hole's influence was reaching Earth far sooner than their models had predicted. It started with small things, localized gravitational fluctuations that scientists initially dismissed as equipment malfunctions. But then the reports became impossible to ignore. In Tasmania, an entire lake had lifted from its bed, hanging suspended for 6 minutes before crashing back down. A small town in Norway reported that time itself seemed to be moving differently within its borders, clocks running faster or slower depending on their location. Dr. Moreland. Rachel Patel, her graduate student, called from across the lab. "You need to see this." The young researcher's normally steady hands trembled as she pulled up the latest satellite imagery. The screen showed a massive gravitational distortion over the Pacific Ocean, a ripple in spacetime visible even from orbit. "How long has this been happening?" Moreland asked, though she already knew the answer. "It started about an hour ago. The effect is spreading." The intercom crackled to life. "Dr. Moreland, Admiral Harrison is on the line. Priority 1. In the conference room, Harrison's face filled the main screen. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Tell me you have something, Doctor." "The black hole's gravitational field is creating quantum-level distortions in our spacetime," she explained. "Think of it like ripples in a pond, except these ripples are tearing at the fabric of reality itself. Can we stop it?" "Not from here." She took a deep breath. "The mission needs to launch now. We're running out of time." "The solstice isn't ready," Harrison objected. "We're still 3 weeks from completion. In 3 weeks, there might not be an Earth left to save." The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Finally, Harrison nodded. "I'll make the calls. Be at Edwards Air Force Base tomorrow morning. Oh, and Moreland. Make your peace with anyone you need to. Once we launch, there's no guarantee we're coming back." That evening, Moreland stood outside Max's school, watching students stream out of the building. He spotted her and froze, surprise quickly replaced by wariness. At 16, he was already taller than her, though he still had his father's eyes. "Mom. What are you doing here?" "I needed to see you," she said. "I'm leaving tomorrow." His laugh was bitter. "Of course you are. Let me guess, important research." "I'm going up there, Max. To the black hole." That stopped him. For a moment, she saw a flash of the little boy who used to beg her to explain how stars worked. "Why you?" "Because I understand it better than most. Because I might be able to stop it." She reached for him, then let her hand fall. "I know I haven't been there for you. I know saying, 'I'm sorry,' doesn't fix anything. But I need you to understand, this isn't just another project. If we fail, everyone dies. Including you." Max stared at her for a long moment. Then, Surprisingly, he hugged her. "Just, come back, okay?" She held him tight, memorizing the moment. "I'll try." The next morning, Edwards Air Force Base hummed with activity. The solstice dominated the landscape, its sleek form representing humanity's best hope for survival. The ship had been designed for deep space exploration, but they'd modified it extensively over the past months, adding experimental gravity shielding and enhanced sensor arrays. The crew assembled in the briefing room. Dr. Oliver Reed, the ship's engineer, whose quiet competence had earned him 3 NASA commendations, Lieutenant Diana Rodriguez, their pilot, who had more space hours than the rest of them combined, Dr. William Nash, the quantum physicist whose theories had helped design the ship's protective systems, and several others. They all looked to Moreland as she entered. "I won't lie to you," she began. "We're launching before we're ready, heading towards something we barely understand, using untested technology that might kill us all. But we're also the only chance Earth has." Reed raised his hand. "The gravitational shielding is experimental. We've never tested it against anything this powerful." "The simulations show it should hold," Nash interjected. "Simulations aren't reality," Rodriguez pointed out. "And if the shielding fails, we'll be torn apart at the atomic level," Moreland finished. "I know. But every minute we wait, the distortions get worse. You've all seen the reports. Time dilation events are increasing. Gravitational anomalies are appearing worldwide. We have to move now." Through the window, she could see the sun rising over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere out there, Max was probably just waking up. She wondered if he was watching the same sunrise, if he was thinking of her. The final checks went quickly, too quickly for comfort, but time was their enemy now. As they boarded the Solstice, Moreland felt the weight of billions of lives pressing down on her shoulders. The ship's systems hummed to life around them, a symphony of human ingenuity and desperate hope. "All stations, report readiness," Rodriguez called from the pilot's seat. One by one, the crew confirmed their positions. Moreland strapped into her station, surrounded by screens displaying the latest data from Earth's observatories. The black hole's signature pulsed on every display, a cosmic heartbeat counting down to extinction. "Launch in 5 minutes, Harrison's voice came through the calm, "Godspeed, Solstice. Bring us back a miracle." As the final countdown began, Moreland thought of Max, of all the moments she'd missed, of all the things she still needed to tell him. The engines ignited with a roar that shook the ship to its bones. "Here we go," Rodriguez muttered. The Solstice lifted off, carrying its crew toward either salvation or destruction. As Earth fell away beneath them, Moreland couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading towards something far stranger than any of them imagined. The black hole waited in the darkness ahead, but something about its unnatural appearance, its controlled movements, suggested an intelligence behind its arrival. They were about to discover just how small humanity's place in the universe really was. 3 weeks into their journey, the Solstice cruised through the void between Mars and Jupiter. Dr. Samantha Moreland sat at her station, watching the gravitational readings grow steadily more erratic. The black hole's influence was stronger here, away from Earth's protective magnetic field. "Dr. Reed," she called out, "how's the shielding holding up?" Oliver Reed's fingers danced across his console, his weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of the displays. "We're at 60% capacity. The strain is increasing, but we should be able to compensate." Lieutenant Rodriguez adjusted their course slightly, compensating for another gravitational wave. Even with the ship's advanced stabilizers, they could feel each pulse rippling through the hull. The crew had grown used to the sensation, but it remained unsettling. "New data from Earth," Dr. Nash announced from his station. "The temporal distortions are spreading. They've lost contact with Mumbai, the entire city's experiencing accelerated time. 3 days there equals 1 hour everywhere else." Moreland closed her eyes briefly. They'd known this might happen, but the reality was still devastating. "Any word from the Sydney anomaly?" Still frozen. No change since last week. The ship's communications officer, James Chen, suddenly straightened in his chair. Doctor, I'm picking up something strange. It's not radio waves, not any normal electromagnetic radiation. Put it through the main speakers. The sound that filled the bridge wasn't really a sound at all, more like a pressure in their minds, a rhythm that bypassed their ears entirely. It pulsed in complex patterns that seemed almost deliberate. It's coming from the black hole, Rodriguez said, her voice tight. Or something near it. Moreland studied the pattern. There was something familiar about it, something that tickled the edges of her understanding. Dr. Nash, run a quantum analysis. Compare it to the gravitational fluctuations we've been tracking. Nash's eyes widened as the results appeared on his screen. They match. The pattern in the signal is identical to the gravitational waves affecting Earth. This isn't natural phenomenon, it's communication. The revelation hit the crew like a physical force. They'd theorized, speculated, but now they had proof. The black hole wasn't just an astronomical event. It was being controlled. Show me the latest visual data, Moreland ordered. The main screen lit up with the most recent long-range scans. The black hole was visible now, a perfect circle of absence against the star field. But around it, barely visible in the accretion disk's glow, something else caught their attention. Enhance that section, Reed suggested, pointing to a geometric pattern that seemed to float near the event horizon. As the image cleared, they saw it, a massive structure of interlocking rings, each 1 kilometer wide, rotating around the black hole in impossible patterns. The material it was made from seemed to absorb and emit light simultaneously, creating a visual effect that hurt their eyes to look at. That's not possible, Nash whispered. Nothing should be able to maintain structural integrity that close to a black hole. Clearly, someone figured it out, Rodriguez replied. Moreland felt a chill run down her spine. It's not just maintaining its structure, it's using the black hole's gravity. The construct is some kind of machine. And I think it's what's been steering the black hole toward Earth. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't dealing with a natural disaster anymore, but with technology far beyond human understanding. The question was, why Earth? Why now? A sudden surge in the gravitational readings interrupted their contemplation. The ship shuddered violently, warning alerts blaring across every station. Gravitational wave incoming. Reed shouted. Much stronger than the others. Brace for impact. Rodriguez called out, but her warning came too late. The wave hit them like a tsunami, sending the Solstice into an uncontrolled spin. Moreland gripped her console as the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. Through the viewport, she saw space itself seem to bend and twist. Then, just as suddenly, everything stopped. The ship stabilized, the alarms fell silent, and the crew slowly recovered their bearings. Status report, Moreland demanded, trying to keep the shakiness out of her voice. Hull integrity at 82%, Reed reported. Shielding held, but barely. One more hit like that and... Doctor, Chen interrupted, you need to see this. The main screen showed their position relative to the black hole. The gravitational wave hadn't just rattled them, it had pushed them closer, much closer than their planned approach trajectory. It pulled us in, Rodriguez realized. Like it's inviting us. Moreland studied the construct, its rings still rotating in their perfect, impossible dance around the black hole. The signal continued its rhythmic pulse, stronger now, more insistent. No, she said quietly. Not inviting. Summoning. As if in response, another pattern emerged in the signal, more complex than before. Images began to form in Moreland's mind, not visual, but conceptual. She saw systems of interconnected black holes stretching across the galaxy, each one surrounded by constructs like the one before them. She saw civilizations rise and fall, time itself bending and twisting around these cosmic anchors. "It's not just this black hole," she said, her voice distant. "This is part of something bigger. A network." "For what purpose?" Nash asked. Before she could answer, the ship's sensors detected another gravitational wave building. This one was different, more focused, more controlled. "We have a choice to make," Moreland announced. "We can try to retreat, get back to safe distance. Or we can ride the wave in, let it take us where it wants us to go." Rodriguez turned in her chair. "That's not much of a choice. If we retreat, Earth is still doomed. And if we go forward, we might be too," Reed pointed out. Moreland thought of Max, of the promise she'd made to return. But she also thought of Mumbai, of Sydney, of all the places already touched by whatever force they'd encountered. "Take us in," she ordered. "But carefully. If this is first contact, let's try not to make it our last." The Solstice's engines hummed as Rodriguez adjusted their course. The construct grew larger in their view, its alien geometry becoming more apparent with each passing moment. The signal's rhythm seemed to sync with their heartbeats, as if the very fabric of space was preparing for what came next. They were about to cross a threshold, Moreland realized. Not just the physical boundary of safe approach to a black hole, but a threshold in human understanding. Whatever they found on the other side would change everything. She just hoped they were ready for what awaited them. The Solstice drifted in the black hole's orbit, its engines working constantly to maintain position against the immense gravitational forces. Through the viewports, the construct's rings cast strange shadows that seemed to move independently of any light source. Dr. Moreland stood at her station, watching as another set of readings defied everything she thought she knew about physics. "The construct's outer ring is rotating at different speeds simultaneously," Dr. Nash reported, his voice tight with barely contained excitement. "It's not just breaking the laws of physics, it's operating on principles we can't even comprehend." Lieutenant Rodriguez kept her hands steady on the controls, though her knuckles were white with tension. "The gravitational shielding is holding, but these readings are off the charts. Whatever that thing is, it's generating more energy than our sun." A new pattern emerged in the signal they'd been monitoring. The rhythm changed, becoming more complex, more urgent. Moreland felt it resonating in her bones, like music played too low to hear but felt in every cell. "Dr. Reed," she called out, "are the quantum sensors ready?" Reed nodded from his engineering station. "As ready as they'll ever be. But doctor, we're operating way beyond their designed parameters. There's no guarantee they'll work, or that we'll understand what they tell us if they do. At this point, I'll take any data we can get." She turned to the communications station. "Mr. Chen, broadcast the response pattern we developed. Let's see if we can establish some kind of dialogue." Chen's fingers moved across his console, sending out the carefully crafted sequence of gravitational pulses they designed based on mathematical constants. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the construct's rings began to move in new patterns, their rotation synchronizing with the ship's broadcast. "Energy spike!" Reed shouted. "Something's happening." A beam of light, though light seemed an inadequate term for what they were seeing, extended from the construct toward the Solstice. It wasn't visible in the conventional sense, more like a distortion in space itself that their eyes struggled to process. "Evasive maneuvers?" Rodriguez asked, her hand hovering over the controls. Moreland studied the beam. It wasn't attacking them. If the construct wanted to destroy them, it could have done so easily. No, this was something else. "Hold position," she ordered. "Let's see what it wants to show us." The beam touched the ship's hull, and reality shifted. Moreland found herself standing in what looked like an infinite corridor of light, though she knew her physical body was still on the Solstice. The walls, floor, and ceiling were made of what appeared to be flowing energy, patterns of information cascading in all directions. "Is everyone seeing this?" she asked, her voice echoing strangely. "Yes, came Nash's reply, though she couldn't see him. Some kind of shared hallucination, maybe. Or direct neural interface. This isn't a hallucination, Reed said. The quantum sensors are going crazy. Whatever this is, it's real, just not in any way we're equipped to understand. Patterns began to form in the flowing energy around them, complex mathematical sequences that spoke of concepts beyond human language. Moreland recognized elements of quantum mechanics, of gravitational theory, but taken to levels that made her head spin. It's showing us how it works, she realized. The construct, the black hole network, it's all part of something bigger. A system for what? Rodriguez's voice was tense. Before Moreland could answer, new images formed. She saw the universe as the construct saw it, not as a static three-dimensional space, but as a complex web of interconnected realities. The black holes weren't just gravitational phenomena, they were nodes in a vast network, each one carefully positioned and maintained by constructs like the one they'd found. It's a transit system, Nash breathed. The black holes are like subway stations in spacetime itself. But who built it? Chen asked. And why target Earth? The construct responded to their questions with more images. Moreland saw civilizations rise and fall, saw species evolve and vanish, all while the network remained. The construct wasn't built by any one species, it was ancient beyond comprehension, possibly predating their universe itself. Earth isn't a target, Moreland said slowly, understanding dawning. It's being inducted. The black hole's approach, the gravitational effects, it's all part of the process. The network is expanding, and Earth is next in line for a station. But the temporal distortions are tearing the planet apart, Rodriguez protested. If this continues. More patterns formed, showing possible futures. In one, Earth adapted to the black hole's presence, becoming part of the network, its people eventually learning to use it to reach the stars. In another, the planet was ripped apart by gravitational forces, its population scattered across spacetime. We have a choice, Moreland realized. The construct is giving us a choice. We can try to stop this, force the black hole away from Earth, or we can embrace it, help guide the transition. That's not much of a choice, Reed muttered. Either we risk everything on technology we don't understand, or we watch our world tear itself apart. The construct pulsed again, and Moreland felt understanding flood her mind. There's more to it than that. The network, it's not just for travel. It's preserving something. Knowledge, history, the accumulated wisdom of countless civilizations. By joining, we become part of that legacy. At what cost? Rodriguez asked. Before anyone could answer, alarms blared through their shared vision. Reality snapped back, and they found themselves on the solstice again, the construct still looming before them. Gravitational surge incoming. Reed shouted. Bigger than anything we've seen. Moreland rushed to her station, checking the readings. The black hole's influence was increasing exponentially. Back on Earth, the temporal distortions would be reaching critical levels. They had minutes, maybe hours, to make their decision. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and they were the only ones who understood enough to choose. What do we do, Doctor? Chen asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Moreland thought of Max, of all the children on Earth who deserved a future. But what kind of future? One of safe isolation, or one of unlimited potential and unknown risks? The construct waited, its ring still turning, its offer still open. The next move was theirs. Time seemed to slow on the bridge of the solstice as Dr. Moreland made her decision. The construct's rings continued their impossible dance around the black hole, waiting for humanity's answer. We can't make this choice for the entire human race, Rodriguez said, her hands steady on the controls despite the growing gravitational distortions. We already have, Moreland replied. The moment we launched this mission, we accepted responsibility for whatever comes next. She turned to her station and began inputting commands. Dr. Nash, help me establish a quantum link with the construct. Lieutenant Rodriguez, move us closer, we'll need perfect alignment for this to work. For what to work? Reed asked from engineering. We're going to help it adjust the transition. Moreland's fingers flew across her console. The construct showed us how the network operates. If we can synchronize our ship's systems with its quantum field, we might be able to guide the process, make it safer for Earth. The plan was audacious, perhaps impossible. But as another gravitational wave rocked the ship, they knew they were out of options. Quantum link established, Nash reported. But Doctor, the energy readings are massive. Our systems weren't designed for this kind of power. Neither was humanity designed for faster-than-light travel, Moreland said. Sometimes we have to evolve. Through the viewport, the construct's rings began to shift, responding to their attempts at communication. The signal they'd been receiving changed, becoming more focused, more directed. In Moreland's mind, images formed, instructions, showing exactly what they needed to do. Channel all power to the quantum sensors, she ordered. And get me a direct line to Earth. They need to know what's coming. The next hour was a blur of activity. As the solstice's systems merged with the construct's field, they began to understand its true nature. It wasn't just a machine or a gateway, it was a bridge between states of existence, a tool for shepherding civilizations through evolutionary bottlenecks. Energy levels are critical, Reed warned. Hull integrity at 40% and falling. Just a little longer, Moreland insisted. Through their connection with the construct, she could feel the changes beginning. The black hole's approach was unchangeable, but its effects could be controlled, channeled, transformed from destruction into catalyst. On Earth, the temporal distortions began to stabilize. Instead of random fluctuations tearing reality apart, they formed patterns, creating stable zones where humanity could learn to adapt to their new existence. It's working, Nash breathed, watching the data stream in. The construct is teaching us. Not just about the network, but about everything. The quantum sensors are downloading more information than all of human knowledge combined. The ship shuddered again, but this time it felt different, not violent, but transformative. Through the viewport, they watched as the construct's rings aligned perfectly with their position, creating a bridge of energy that enveloped the solstice. All stations, report, Moreland called out, fighting to stay focused as information flooded her consciousness. Hull holding, barely, Reed responded. Quantum field stable, Nash added. Navigation, responsive, Rodriguez said, though her voice held a note of wonder. Doctor, I'm seeing possibilities. Flight paths through dimensions we didn't know existed. The construct was changing them, preparing them. Not just the crew, but through their connection, all of humanity. It wasn't an invasion or an apocalypse, it was an invitation to join something greater than themselves. Moreland thought of Max, imagining him looking up at the sky from Earth. The black hole would be visible now, a new star in the heavens. But thanks to their intervention, it would no longer bring destruction. Instead, it would open doors humanity had never dreamed possible. Message from Earth, Chen announced. They're reporting stabilization. The temporal distortions are forming predictable patterns. Major cities are adapting, developing, they're calling them quantum zones. Areas where normal physics still applies, connected by corridors of altered spacetime. The beginning of our transition, Moreland said softly. Not an end, but a metamorphosis. The construct pulsed one final time, and Moreland understood its last message. This wasn't a single event, but the start of a journey. Humanity would have years, decades, perhaps centuries to fully integrate with the network. The black hole would remain in stable orbit, its power harnessed by the construct, becoming Earth's first gateway to the larger universe. Take us home, she ordered Rodriguez. Slowly. We have a lot to teach them. The return journey was different. They could feel the changes in themselves and their ship, alterations subtle but profound. The solstice had become more than a vessel, it was now a bridge between what humanity had been and what it would become. 6 months later, Moreland stood in her backyard with Max, looking up at the night sky. The black hole was visible now, a perfect circle of darkness ringed by the construct's ethereal light. It should have been terrifying, but instead, it felt like hope. So what happens now? Max asked, his voice carrying none of its former bitterness. Now we learn, she replied. The construct didn't just give us technology, it gave us perspective. We're part of something bigger now. Something wonderful and terrifying and impossible to fully comprehend. But you'll be around more, right? There was still that note of uncertainty in his voice, the echo of old wounds. She put her arm around his shoulders, noting with surprise that he was now taller than her. Yes. The universe may be infinite, but some things are still more important than others. Above them, the construct's rings turned in their eternal dance, a reminder that change, while often frightening, could also be beautiful. Humanity had taken its first steps into a larger reality, and they would face it together, one impossible day at a time. The black hole that had seemed like an ending had become a beginning instead. And somewhere, in the vast network of space-time, other civilizations were waiting to welcome their newest members. They just had to learn how to reach them first.